the restorations here. And so what we did, because tours were coming in, is we just started popping just a few of them back up, but by no means is it the whole thing. Because that whole space over there and all along here is empty, as you can see. Our focus here with Tubman is when she was here in St. Catharines, known as the Moses of her people, so the code name Moses. We only focus a little bit on Maryland, her enslavement, and we'll only focus a little bit on Auburn, New York, where she settled after the Civil War. So, number one, what was the Underground Railroad? Anybody?
Escape.
Okay, it was the grouping of people who facilitated the escape of enslaved people from the South. So you could go from household to household, wagon with a false bottom, or various ways to get out of it.
Exactly, so it was a network of people helping people escape enslavement to the north or to Canada. Was it discussed as openly as we discuss it today? No. Why? Because it was a secret society. And if you were caught aiding and abetting individuals, you were going to prison, or in some cases, you were going to die. Yes. So we start off with Harriet Tubman here in 1849. So she first escapes with her two brothers, and they force her to turn back. So it's in the fall of 1849, September. They force her to turn back because they're frightened. They don't want to leave their loved ones. Again, the number one dynamic of enslavement was the separation of families. Do you know there was a great deal of difficulty to leave your loved ones behind? So many could not do it. Those that did do it, out of that, 50% developed mental health issues by the time they made it to the Free States or to Canada, because you're thinking about your loved ones left behind. So Tubman's brothers make her turn back. She still finds out that she's going to be sold away. So she's married to John Tubman. She learns that she's going to be separated from her family and sold. And the number one threat at the time was Georgia. So she decided, as many did, if I'm never going to see my family or my loved ones again, then it's going to be on my terms. I'm leaving. Goodbye. And she escaped and made her way to Philadelphia. These pictures here are tin plates. You're going to see them, a few of them lining the lower level of the displays. They're from the Rick Bell collection at Brock University. These are people of African descent, African Americans, who made their way to St. Catharines, and they were living here, but they're unknown. We don't know who the individuals are. And then some of the other ones, they were taken by St. Catharines photographers, and we still don't know their names, but they're in the Rick Bell collection, and that's housed at Brock University. So, I already mentioned upstairs the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law. So this is about the Fugitive Slave Bill here. This is Harriet Tubman's first rescue when she's living in Philadelphia. She learns that her niece, Keziah Jolie Boldy, is going to be sold off at the Cambridge courthouse. So Keziah and Keziah's two children, James Alfred and Araminta, Harriet Tubman's namesake, because Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross. So she goes back a couple of times and tries to, she rescues her brother Moses, takes him to Philadelphia and two other black males. Then she tries to collect her husband. That was in the movie. When she went to collect him, the movie was accurate, but the timeline was off with regards to her husband. He found another woman. So she had not seen him for 2 years, so he took on another wife, and he married a free black woman. So Harriet Tubman said in her narrative, if he could drop me so easily out of his heart, I could do the same. And she did. So she gathered a group of 9 freedom seekers, took them to Philadelphia. A couple of months later, she went back, collected 11 freedom seekers, and guided them to St. Catharines, so December 1851. Frederick Douglass said the most he ever housed in his house were 11 freedom seekers. He never said it was Tubman in her group. He just said he housed 11. Scholars today believe that it was Harriet Tubman and the 11 that she brought. This is her, a depiction of her arriving with 11 freedom seekers crossing Suspension Bridge. Again, that could have been Queenston Lewiston because the other one wasn't built until 1855, but we don't know where she crossed. She could have literally crossed in Fort Erie. This is information about her rescues between 1851 and 55, and a couple of them I've already mentioned. This was her, as scholars would say, she was exiled here in St. Catharines, or this British colony, and she gave the impression that she never returned, and we'll get to that she never went back to the US. So here you're gonna see pictures of St. Catharines, so this is pretty much the period of when Harriet Tubman lived here. So this was St. Paul Street Methodist Church. When the church was built, William Hamilton Merritt sold us the church. Niagara's leading abolitionist is from St. Catharines, sold us this church for £5, which is relatively $1 in today's currency. 1852, white men were not pleased with seeing black men parade in red coats, in red uniforms, so British military outfits. So, they were pelting rocks at them as they're parading through the downtown core. Here, black people had the right to vote, they had the right to an education, they had the same rights as white people. So of course they went to seek justice. They wanted these guys arrested. They were blown off. Later on that night, they decided, you know what? After hitting some sauce themselves, God only knows where they were doing that. They decided, you know what, we're gonna go down to Stinson's Tavern and we're gonna confront these guys. And they did. Well, those guys, of course, white males are retaliating, fighting back. They enlist the help of the fire brigade, and they come down to the black community because this area was known as the Colored Village, and they burned down the homes all along North Street. Said North Street was the Broadway of the area. 1 year later, council paid for those homes to be restored. So that's just one thing. So it only happened in 2 other spots, Dresden and Puce, Ontario, as well as here. So for a short while, it was the burned over district. Frederick Douglass, because it was making international news, when he arrived in September, he commented on it and said, you know, some of the place is still salvageable, but for the most part, everybody gets along. So that's just briefly what he's saying there. So here's some arrivals. Here's 1854. And Eric and Jada's grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather is listed on here. But here's Harriet Tubman's brother, William Henry Stewart. So he was one of the individuals that made her turn back. In December 1854, the infamous Raid on Christmas. So she goes back, she collects her 3 brothers, so 2 plus an additional brother. And this picture was taken in St. Catharines, plus an additional brother, and 1 brother's wife. And she guides them here to St. Catharines, so 10 in total, so that's a large number. So 11 and then 10 again. Usually, the percentage was individual black males would escape on their own, 1 or 2. Women, and that's the percentage for black males escaping is 80%, 20% female, and usually people under the age of 35. So this is information about Tubman's rescue with her brothers. Mary Ann Shad Carey, first black female publisher. Freeborn, she was one of the individuals that relocated to Canada after the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law passed. Her and her family. So what she said about St. Catharines, because schools were segregated here. In St. Paul's ward, black youth were receiving the D and B grade, the B to D grade teachers. So they weren't first class. So she railed against that, and she also said white men like William Hamilton Merritt, even though they were staunch abolitionists, she said they were riddled with Negrophobia. One of her colleagues, Samuel Ringgold Ward, said that St. Catharines was the most Yankee town in the Dominion. This is because these men, although entrepreneurs and staunch abolitionists, so they were loyalists, but they were there to celebrate August 1st. Because, again, white males set black people free. They abolished slavery. But for St. Catharines in Niagara Falls, those that were driving the economy, the tourists, were Southerners. So there's the dilemma. What are we going to do? It's the gateway to freedom. Freedom seekers are welcome to come here and live. They have the same rights as we do. But Southerners are actually funding our economy. They're moving it. So that's why they said that, because it's the same within the northern states. Anti-slavery sympathizers, businessmen and merchants had to do business with the South, even though they hated slavery. So Ward, Samuel Ringgold Ward, seen people like William Hamilton Merritt as no different than northern white men. 1854 boycott. So the only reason why this isn't posted is because it's got a mark in it. But the displays are going to change again. forced white businessmen like William Hamilton Merritt to stop allowing black people to take coaches with them. They're coming up here, they're paying the money, if it wasn't for them, because the population, so for example in 1855, 6,000 residents, 700 people of African descent, but when it was tourist season, double the population, and the majority coming from the south. So, there was a boycott. We don't want black folks getting in the same coach with us. We don't mind them working in the hotels and serving us, you know, doing our laundry and giving us a massage, things like that, but to ride on the same coach, forget it. So there was a boycott, and it went on for 30 days, and then white men like William Hamilton Merritt decided, you know what, we're gonna have to cave, so they gave in. Southerners, go somewhere else, because this is how it's gonna be. And that's how it was. Benjamin Drew, Boston abolitionist, he arrived in 1855. He writes a book that counters the South Side view of slavery. Excuse me, his book is called The North Side View of Slavery. Because the number one thing after the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law passed, and what was leading up to it, is what are we going to do with the Negroes if we set them free? What are we going to do with them? So that's what they said. So Drew wanted to come up here to prove that everybody could be self-sufficient. They have their own homes, they could work, they could become entrepreneurs, they could do whatever they wanted. So this is what he said about St. Catherine's, refuge for the oppressed, and he interviewed Harriet Tubman and two of her brothers, along with a sister-in-law. So remember the Black Lives Matter right after the George Floyd murder? Black Lives Matter, fast forward to Virginia, the Confederate Mall, and then you see the big statue of General Lee that they want to remove, so it's gone now. But remember they used to project pictures on that statue? Well, the one that was projected the most, almost on a daily basis, was Harriet Tubman. And from this quote here, the only one from St. Catherine's, Drew interviewed her and captured her, and it was under her real name, because she says here, I would rather be in my native land, which was true. If it wasn't for the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law, she wouldn't have seen Canada or British North America. But the one that they would project on that monument is, I think slavery is the next thing to hell, because that's what Harriet Tubman said. So, you know,